Emily woke before sunrise, the soft gray light of the early morning spilling through the thin curtains of her small room. The old wooden floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet as she moved quietly, careful not to wake her father, who was still sleeping in the next room. Her life had become a pattern of early mornings and long, lonely days, filled with responsibilities that seemed to grow heavier with each passing year. She had grown used to silence, the kind that came not from peace but from the absence of anyone who truly saw her. She dressed quickly, choosing a plain blouse and worn jeans, her hair pulled back into a simple braid. There was no time for makeup or frills. Her world had little room for such luxuries. Emily had learned early that life could be harsh, and she had to face it with strength, even when her heart ached. As she poured herself a cup of coffee, she glanced at the small photograph pinned to the wall. Her mother, smiling warmly. A memory from a time when laughter and light filled their home. That was before the sickness, before the loss, before everything had changed. Emily's father had grown weaker over the years. Once, a strong man who had guided her with gentle advice and quiet encouragement, he now relied on her for nearly everything. Even simple tasks like getting dressed or walking to the kitchen had become struggles for him. Emily did what she could, tending to his needs with patience, though exhaustion often tugged at her shoulders. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily on her. But she carried it without complaint, because she loved him. Her work at the diner started early, long before the town stirred to life. The smell of frying bacon and brewing coffee was both comforting and exhausting. It reminded her of the mornings she had spent with her mother, laughter echoing through the kitchen. But those memories were bittersweet now, reminders of a life that felt impossibly far away. Emily moved with quiet efficiency, greeting a few early customers with polite smiles that masked the fatigue in her eyes. Each day felt like a repetition of the last, a cycle of work, care, and solitude. Despite the hardships, Emily had a quiet strength that few people noticed. She moved through the world with careful steps, observing more than speaking, listening more than sharing. She had learned that people often did not understand pain unless they had walked through it themselves, and so she carried her struggles alone, the loneliness of her life becoming her constant companion. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit by the window, staring at the stars and wishing for a life that felt lighter, a life filled with hope and possibility. On one of those nights, Emily found herself wandering into the open fields that stretched beyond the town. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers, and the sky was painted in shades of deep blue and purple. She walked slowly, letting the solitude wrap around her like a comforting blanket. Here, away from the demands of her home and work, she felt a small spark of freedom, a fleeting sense that maybe, just maybe, life could hold something more than exhaustion and sorrow. As she walked, her thoughts drifted to the future, a future that felt uncertain and distant. She dreamed of a life where she could breathe without the weight of worry pressing down on her chest, where she could laugh without fear of interruption, where she could live simply for herself, even for a moment. Those dreams were fragile, easily broken by the reality she faced, but they were hers nonetheless. They reminded her that she was still alive, still capable of hope, even when the world seemed determined to take it away. The townspeople often didn't notice Emily. She passed through the streets with quiet steps, nodding politely to familiar faces, but never lingering. Some people assumed she was shy or reserved, but the truth was more complex. Emily had learned that people rarely saw what lay beneath the surface. They did not know the nights she spent crying silently, the days she endured pain with a forced smile, the moments she longed for escape. And so she walked alone, her solitude both a shield and a prison. Emily's days were not without small joys, however fleeting they might be. She loved the quiet moments in the diner, when a customer left with a genuine smile, when the aroma of fresh bread filled the air, when the sunlight streamed through the window in a golden glow. She cherished the few friends she had, though they were often far away or caught up in their own lives. And she treasured the evenings she spent walking in the fields, where the wind whispered through the tall grass and the world felt infinite, even if only for a short while. Yet the weight of her life pressed on relentlessly. Bills needed to be paid, her father needed care, and the town expected her to keep moving, to keep performing the role of dutiful daughter and hard-working employee. Sometimes, she would feel a sharp pang of envy when she saw others carefree and laughing, wondering why happiness seemed so unattainable for her. She did not resent them, only wondered why life had dealt her such a heavy hand. And in those moments, she would return to the fields, to the silence and the sky, and allow herself to dream of a different life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily lingered longer than usual in the fields. The sky blazed with oranges and purples, a reminder that beauty could exist even amidst pain. She sat on a small hill, her knees pulled to her chest, and let the wind play with her hair. For a brief moment, she felt lighter, as though the burdens she carried had loosened their grip. She closed her eyes and imagined what it might be like to walk freely, without fear or sorrow, to breathe deeply without the weight of responsibility pressing down. It was in these quiet moments that Emily allowed herself to hope, fragile though it was. She imagined meeting someone who might understand her, who might offer kindness without expectation, who might see the real her beyond the layers of pain and exhaustion. She imagined a future where she could laugh fully, live fully, and feel alive in a way she had almost forgotten. Those dreams were small sparks, but sparks could grow into flames, and Emily held on to them fiercely. Little did she know that her life was on the verge of a profound change. A storm was coming, one that would not only test her strength, but also introduce her to someone who could alter her world in ways she had never imagined. The person she would meet would challenge her fears, show her the meaning of trust, and awaken feelings she thought had been buried forever. For now, however, Emily remained in the quiet of the fields, unaware that her life was about to shift. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp evening air, and whispered a small hope into the wind. A hope that life could be brighter, gentler, and filled with unexpected kindness. She did not yet know that the answers she longed for were closer than she could imagine, waiting in the form of a stranger whose life would intersect with hers in a moment of fate. And so, Emily stood there, a young woman shaped by hardship, but not yet broken, carrying the weight of her world with quiet courage. She did not know what the future held, but she held onto a fragile thread of hope, the belief that perhaps, one day, life could feel lighter, brighter, and filled with possibilities she had never dared to dream. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of distant thunder rumbling across the sky. The sun struggled to shine through the thick gray clouds, and the air smelled damp and heavy. Something in the atmosphere made her heart tighten with unease. She had always loved the quiet mornings, the gentle light, and the calm air. But today, even nature seemed restless, as if warning her that a storm was coming, not just in the sky, but in her life. She dressed quickly, feeling a strange urgency to finish her morning routine. Her father stirred behind her, coughing weakly, and she hurried to prepare breakfast. She moved efficiently, pouring cereal, brewing coffee, and making toast. But her mind kept returning to the sound of the thunder. The wind began to pick up, rattling the windows of their small home. Emily paused for a moment, glancing outside, and saw the trees swaying violently, their branches bending under the force of the gusts. The sky had darkened, turning a deep, foreboding gray. By the time she left for work, the storm was closer. Heavy drops of rain splashed against her jacket as she hurried down the familiar streets of the small town. The streets, usually quiet at this hour, were now slick and slippery. Puddles formed quickly on the uneven pavement, reflecting the dim light of the clouds above. Emily's pace quickened as she realized the storm was gaining strength. Each step felt more urgent, as if the weather itself were warning her to be careful. As she approached the diner, the first strong gusts of wind hit her, nearly knocking her off balance. She clutched her bag tighter and pushed forward, grateful when she finally reached the door and stepped inside. The warm air of the diner was a relief, a small pocket of comfort in the midst of the chaos outside. She shook off the rain and offered a polite smile to the early customers, though her mind was still focused on the storm raging beyond the walls. Throughout her shift, the storm worsened. The wind howled through the cracks in the diner's windows, and sheets of rain battered the streets outside. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by deep, rolling thunder that shook the building. Emily's heart raced each time the thunder roared, reminding her of how small and vulnerable she sometimes felt in the face of the world's uncontrollable forces. She served her customers with practiced efficiency, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The storm was more than a weather event. It was a symbol of the uncertainty and fear that had always followed her. When her shift finally ended, Emily knew she had to return home. The storm had grown violent, and the streets were flooded in places. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself and stepped back into the rain, wishing for a car or someone to help her, but she had neither. Each step became harder, as the wind tore at her jacket and rain soaked her shoes. Her hair clung to her face, and water dripped down her neck. Her heart pounded not just from the exertion but from the fear that something could go wrong. She had walked this path countless times before, but tonight it felt different. The storm was alive, almost threatening, as if testing her resolve. She slipped on the muddy pavement once, catching herself on a fence post, her hands trembling. Her thoughts raced. What if she fell again? What if she couldn't make it home safely? Fear, the kind that settled deep in her chest, filled her. She had spent so many years living with pain, with hardship, but this moment felt sharper, more immediate. She realized how fragile life could be, how quickly safety could vanish. It was then that she saw him. A figure moved steadily through the rain, almost like a shadow, yet somehow solid and strong. Emily couldn't make out his face at first, but there was something in the way he carried himself, a calmness, a confidence that seemed impossible in such a wild storm. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat, and his presence brought an unexpected sense of hope. As he approached, Emily hesitated, unsure if she should call out for help. But before she could speak, he was beside her, extending a gloved hand. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said in a deep, steady voice. There was no judgment in his tone, only concern. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen anyone move with such purpose in the rain. Without thinking, she placed her hand in his, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over her. He led her to a small, covered area nearby, shielding her from the worst of the rain. Emily shivered, both from cold and the unexpected surge of emotions she felt in his presence. The man, Luke, as she would later learn his name, spoke quietly, asking her if she was hurt or needed help getting home. Emily shook her head, unable to find words at first. She had grown so used to facing the world alone that this simple act of kindness stunned her. Luke offered to give her a ride home, and though Emily hesitated, she realized she had little choice. The storm was too dangerous, and the streets were slick with mud and water. She climbed into his old truck, grateful for the warmth inside. The engine roared to life, and the windshield wipers swiped away the rain, clearing a path through the chaos outside. Emily glanced at Luke, noting the calm expression on his face as he navigated the flooded streets. There was a quiet strength in him, a steadiness that made her feel safe for the first time in a long while. During the ride, Emily couldn't help but notice the simple, rugged details of Luke's life. The worn leather of the seats, the smell of hay and leather, the small trinkets on the dashboard. They all spoke of someone who lived close to the land, someone connected to the natural world in a way Emily had forgotten existed. For a brief moment, She allowed herself to imagine what life could be like beyond the struggles she had always known. As they neared her home, the rain began to ease, though the clouds still loomed heavy above. Luke helped Emily out of the truck and walked her to the door, making sure she was safe inside. She turned to thank him, words catching in her throat. Something about him felt different, like he saw her not as a burden or a shadow, but as a person worthy of care and protection. Emily's chest tightened with a strange mix of gratitude and wonder. Before he left, Luke said quietly, "You're stronger than you know. But even the strongest people need help sometimes. Don't forget that." His words lingered long after he disappeared into the fading rain, echoing in Emily's mind. For first formant, Emily's mind. She stood at the doorway, shivering, yet feeling a spark of warmth that had nothing to do with the fire in the kitchen. For the first time in years, she felt seen, noticed, and cared for. That night, as Emily lay in bed, the storm finally passed, leaving the world outside wet and quiet. She thought about Luke and the unexpected way he had appeared in her life. The fear and uncertainty of the storm had been overwhelming, yet in the midst of it, she had found safety, kindness, and hope. Her heart, long accustomed to sorrow, began to feel something new, a flicker of possibility, a gentle reminder that life could surprise her in beautiful ways. For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to dream. She imagined walking through the fields without fear, laughing without hesitation, and feeling truly alive. She thought about the calm strength of Luke and how one act of kindness had shifted something deep inside her. The storm had been terrifying, but it had also brought a moment of grace, a turning point that she would carry with her forever. And as she drifted into sleep, Emily realized that life, even in its hardest moments, could hold unexpected beauty. The storm had reminded her of her vulnerability, but it had also shown her the power of human connection, the strength found in kindness, and the hope that even the darkest days could give way to light. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: her life had changed, and the world suddenly felt full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Emily hesitated for a moment before knocking on Luke's cabin door. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet calm over the land, and the soft light of morning filtered through the clouds. She had been thinking about Luke ever since he had helped her the night before. There was something in his presence, something reassuring, that she couldn't ignore. For reasons she didn't fully understand, she felt drawn to him, as if meeting him had opened a small door in her heart that had been closed for far too long. When the door opened, Luke greeted her with a warm, genuine smile. The cabin was small but cozy, filled with the smell of fresh wood and the faint aroma of coffee. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting a warm glow over the room. Emily felt an immediate sense of safety here, a sharp contrast to the harshness of the storm outside and the challenges of her everyday life. Luke offered her a seat by the fire and handed her a warm cup of coffee. The simple act of kindness made Emily's chest tighten with emotion. She had spent so many years caring for others, giving everything she had, and rarely receiving anything in return. Yet here, in this quiet cabin, someone was offering her care without expectation. She sipped the coffee slowly, feeling the warmth seep into her body, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe fully. They talked quietly, the conversation gentle and easy. Luke didn't press her for details about her life, and Emily appreciated that. She didn't feel judged or rushed. Instead, he shared small stories about his life working the land, helping neighbors, and riding his horses at sunrise. His voice was calm, steady, and grounding. Emily realized how much she had missed having someone to talk to without fear, without hiding parts of herself. Here, she could simply be herself. As the hours passed, Emily began to relax, feeling a sense of trust growing between them. Luke showed her around the cabin, pointing out simple but meaningful things. A handmade rocking chair, a small garden outside, and a bookshelf filled with worn but well-loved books. Each detail spoke of a life lived with care, simplicity, and patience. Emily couldn't help but compare it to her own life, which had been filled with constant struggle, responsibilities, and little room for joy. Here, in this cabin, she felt the possibility of something different, something lighter and more fulfilling. Luke noticed her lingering gaze and smiled gently. "It's not much, but it's home," he said. "Sometimes the simplest things can give the most comfort." Emily nodded, understanding more than he could know. She had spent so many years seeking comfort in the wrong places, trying to fill the emptiness with work, routine, and endless obligations. But now, in this small cabin with a kind stranger, she realized that true comfort came from safety, trust, and human connection. As the morning turned into afternoon, Emily began to share parts of her story, not everything, but small fragments. She spoke of her father's illness, her long hours at the diner, and the loneliness that had followed her for so many years. Luke listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. He offered gentle encouragement when she faltered, and allowed silence when words were too difficult to find. For Emily, this was a new experience. She had grown used to carrying her pain alone, believing that no one could truly understand. But Luke's presence challenged that belief, showing her that sharing her burdens could bring relief, not weakness. Luke offered to show her around the property, and Emily agreed, curious to see more of the life he had described. They stepped outside together, the air crisp and fresh after the storm. The fields stretched out before them, glistening with rain, and the sun peeked through the clouds, casting a golden light over everything. Luke guided her to a small paddock where a few horses grazed peacefully. Emily's eyes widened with wonder as she watched them move gracefully, their strength and beauty captivating her. She had never felt so close to something so alive, so free. "Would you like to try?" Luke asked, gesturing to one of the horses. Emily hesitated, fear and uncertainty flickering in her chest. She had never ridden a horse before, and the thought of climbing onto such a large animal was intimidating. But Luke's calm presence reassured her, and she nodded slowly. He helped her onto the horse, steadying her with a firm but gentle hand. The moment she sat in the saddle, Emily felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Her heart raced, but the wind on her face and the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath her stirred a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. As they rode slowly through the fields, Emily began to laugh softly at first, then more fully. It was a pure, unguarded sound, one that surprised even her. The laughter felt like a release, a shedding of the weight she had carried for so long. Luke watched her with quiet approval, encouraging her without words. For the first time, Emily realized that joy could exist even amidst pain, and that she was capable of experiencing it fully. After the ride, they returned to the cabin, both smiling and slightly breathless. Emily felt a deep gratitude toward Luke, not just for saving her during the storm, but for showing her that life could hold moments of beauty and connection. She had always believed that her days would be filled with struggle and sorrow, but now she saw that there was more to the world than hardship. There was kindness, trust, and the potential for happiness, even in small, unexpected ways. Over the next few hours, Emily and Luke continued to talk, share stories, and enjoy simple activities together. They cooked a modest meal, tending to the fire and laughing over small mishaps. Each interaction deepened the trust between them, allowing Emily to open her heart a little more. She realized that she had been living in a constant state of defense, guarding herself against disappointment, fear, and pain. But Luke's presence showed her that it was possible to be vulnerable and still feel safe. As evening approached, Emily sat by the fire, reflecting on the day. She thought about the storm, her fear, and the way Luke had appeared just when she needed help most. She realized that life could be unpredictable, But moments of grace often came in the most unexpected ways. Luke had not only saved her from the physical dangers of the storm, but he had also begun to rescue her spirit, offering hope where she had felt only despair. The warmth of the cabin, the quiet strength of Luke, and the beauty of the world outside combined to create a sense of peace that Emily had almost forgotten existed. She knew that her journey was far from over, that challenges and hardships would continue to arise. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of confidence, a sense that she could face the world with courage and hope. As night fell, Emily lay on the small couch in the cabin, wrapped in a blanket and listening to the soft crackle of the fire. She felt a deep gratitude for Luke, not only for his actions during the storm, but for the way he had allowed her to see herself differently. She was not just a girl burdened by responsibility and sorrow. She was a young woman capable of joy, resilience, and love. Before falling asleep, Emily whispered quietly to herself, "Maybe life can be different. Maybe I can be happy." The words felt strange yet comforting, like planting a seed in soil that had long been dry. She didn't know how this new chapter of her life would unfold, but she felt ready to discover it, step by step, with courage and hope. And so, Emily slept that night with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The cabin was quiet, safe, and warm. Outside, the stars began to shine in the clear sky, and Emily dreamed of possibilities she had almost forgotten: freedom, joy, and the chance to feel truly alive. She had been saved from the storm, but more importantly, she had been saved from a life that had grown too heavy, too lonely. And in that small, cozy cabin, with the gentle presence of a kind stranger, Emily began to believe that life could hold beauty, even after so much pain. The next morning, Emily woke to the soft sound of birds chirping outside the cabin window. The sunlight streamed gently through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. For the first time in a long while, she woke without the weight of anxiety pressing heavily on her chest. The memory of the storm still lingered, but instead of fear, she felt a quiet sense of gratitude. She stretched, feeling the tension in her body slowly ease, and glanced around the cabin. Everything seemed calm, safe, and peaceful. Luke was already up, tending to the fire and preparing breakfast. He moved with a quiet purpose, a gentle rhythm that made the cabin feel alive, yet serene. Emily watched him for a moment, feeling a strange sense of wonder. This man, a stranger not so long ago, had become her anchor. His presence brought a calm that she hadn't realized she had been missing. He noticed her awake and offered a soft smile. "Morning," he said simply. "Coffee?" She nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness. They shared breakfast together, simple food but comforting. Emily found herself talking more easily than she had in years. She spoke of small memories, little joys she had forgotten, and even some of her fears. Luke listened with patience and understanding, never interrupting or judging. In his calm attention, Emily began to understand something important. She didn't have to carry her burdens alone. There were people who could support her, care for her, and even help her find joy again. After breakfast, Luke suggested they go for a walk along the nearby trails. Emily agreed, and as they stepped outside, the crisp morning air filled her lungs. The storm had left the world refreshed. The grass glistened with dew, the leaves sparkled with tiny droplets of water, and the sky was painted in soft shades of blue and white. The fields seemed endless, and for the first time, Emily allowed herself to feel small, in a good way, not insignificant, but part of something larger, something beautiful. As they walked, Luke taught her how to observe the world differently, noticing the small details often overlooked, the way the sunlight reflected off a puddle, the delicate curve of a leaf, the soft rustle of animals in the distance. Emily found herself slowing her steps, taking in the beauty around her. It was a simple lesson, yet profound. She realized that for years, She had rushed through life, consumed by worry, pain, and responsibility, without truly noticing the world or the moments that could bring joy. Emily began to share more of her story, allowing herself to be vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed in years. She spoke of the nights she had spent crying silently, the moments of despair she had hidden from everyone, and the longing for a life that felt lighter, freer. Luke listened attentively, offering gentle words of comfort. "You've been through so much," he said quietly. "But you're still here, still moving forward. That takes strength." His words resonated deeply with Emily. She had spent so long feeling weak and burdened, yet here was a man recognizing her resilience. The walk led them to a small creek, its waters clear and sparkling. Luke suggested they sit on the bank for a while, and Emily agreed. She watched the water flow steadily, its rhythm calming her restless thoughts. Luke spoke softly about his life, his childhood, and the lessons he had learned living close to the land. Emily listened, feeling a connection not just to him but to the world itself. She began to understand that healing was not about escaping pain but about finding balance, noticing beauty, and allowing oneself to feel joy, even amidst difficulty. After some time, Luke invited Emily to try fishing in the creek. She hesitated at first, unsure of her skill, but the idea of learning something new excited her. He showed her how to hold the rod, cast the line, and wait patiently. At first, Emily was clumsy, frustrated by missed attempts. But Luke's patience never wavered. He encouraged her gently, celebrating her small successes with sincere enthusiasm. By the end of the afternoon, she had caught a small fish, and the pride and joy she felt were overwhelming. She laughed freely, a sound that felt natural and unforced, and realized she had forgotten what it felt like to be truly happy. As they walked back to the cabin with the fish, Emily's mind wandered. She thought about the past months, the hardships she had endured, and the sense of hopelessness that had often weighed her down. Yet now, she saw her experiences in a different light. They had shaped her into a person capable of resilience, empathy, and appreciation for the small joys in life. The pain had not broken her. It had taught her strength. And in Luke's company, she could finally begin to integrate that strength with hope, laughter, and a sense of possibility. Back at the cabin, they prepared the fish together and cooked a modest but satisfying meal. Emily noticed how natural it felt to collaborate, to share tasks, and to enjoy the process. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows across the room, and Emily felt a profound sense of comfort. She realized that healing was not something that happened all at once. It was in these small moments of care, trust, and shared experiences. Luke's presence was steady, reassuring, and allowed her to take the time she needed to rebuild herself. After the meal, they settled by the fireplace with cups of tea. Emily felt a wave of emotions, gratitude, relief, and a quiet excitement for the first time in years. She began to talk about her dreams again, small aspirations she had once thought impossible. Luke listened, encouraging her gently. He reminded her that it was never too late to pursue happiness, to explore new paths, and to embrace life fully. Emily realized that she had been holding herself back, not because she lacked desire, but because she had believed her past pain defined her. Now, she saw that she could define herself differently. As night fell, Emily stepped outside for a moment, breathing in the cool evening air. The sky was clear, dotted with stars that seemed to shine more brightly than she remembered. She felt a sense of wonder, a reminder that life, even after hardship, could hold beauty, magic, and moments of pure joy. She thought about Luke, about his kindness, patience, and the way he had helped her rediscover parts of herself she had long forgotten. She realized that trust and connection were powerful. They could heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend. That night, Emily slept deeply, unburdened by worry or fear. The cabin felt safe, warm, and nurturing, a sanctuary where she could grow, explore, and heal. For the first time in a long while, she dreamed not of escape, but of life itself. She imagined waking up to mornings filled with laughter, afternoons spent learning and exploring, and evenings of quiet reflection and companionship. The sense of possibility filled her with a quiet excitement and anticipation she had not known in years. The days that followed were filled with small, meaningful moments. Emily continued to explore the property, learning more about horses, fishing, and the rhythms of life close to nature. She and Luke shared stories, laughter, and even moments of silence, comfortable in each other's presence. Emily found herself looking forward to each day, noticing the growth within herself. She began to smile more freely, laugh without restraint, and feel gratitude for the little things she had once overlooked. Luke's guidance and friendship helped Emily recognize her own strength and resilience. She realized that while life had been harsh and unfair, she had survived, and she was capable of thriving. The cabin became a place of transformation, a space where she could shed old fears, embrace new possibilities, and begin to feel alive again. Each day brought new lessons, new joys, and a deepening sense of trust, not just in Luke, but in herself and the world around her. Emily began to understand that healing was not a linear process. There were moments of doubt, fear, and sadness, but they were balanced by moments of joy, laughter, and hope. She learned to embrace both, recognizing that they were all part of the journey. The storm that had once terrified her had led her to this place of safety and growth. Luke had been a guide, a protector, and a friend, showing her that life could be beautiful even after pain. By the end of the week, Emily felt a sense of renewal. She was not the same young woman who had faced the storm alone. She had been changed, strengthened, encouraged, and reminded of the joy and beauty that life could offer. She realized that the world was not only a place of hardship, but also a place of wonder, kindness, and possibility. And in the presence of Luke, she had begun to feel alive again, ready to embrace the challenges and joys that lay ahead. The morning air was crisp and clear as Emily stepped outside the cabin, feeling a lightness in her chest she had not known for years. The sun cast long, golden rays across the fields, making the dew sparkle like tiny diamonds on the grass. Emily took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of calm joy. She had endured hardships, storms, both literal and figurative, and yet here she was standing in a place of safety, beauty, and possibility. Luke appeared from the cabin, carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. His presence was calm and reassuring, as always, and Emily smiled at him warmly. "Good morning," he said, handing her a mug. The warmth of the drink mirrored the warmth she felt in her heart. Their morning ritual was simple, but in its simplicity lay a depth that Emily had never experienced before. There were no expectations, no pressure, only presence and care. As they sipped their coffee, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the storm, the fear, and the sense of helplessness she had felt. She remembered the relief she had felt when Luke had appeared, offering help without judgment, simply extending his hand. That moment had marked the beginning of a transformation, one that had continued day by day, slowly, quietly, yet powerfully. She had begun to see herself differently, not as someone trapped by circumstances, but as a person capable of strength, resilience, and joy. After breakfast, Luke suggested they take the horses for a ride across the open fields. Emily eagerly agreed, feeling the thrill of adventure mixed with a sense of peace. The horses moved gracefully beneath them, their hooves thudding softly against the wet earth. Emily laughed freely as the wind whipped through her hair, the feeling of movement and freedom filling her with exhilaration. She realized that this was more than just a ride, it was a metaphor for her life. She had been held back by fear, pain, and past struggles. But now she could move forward with confidence, guided by her own strength and the support of someone who cared. As they rode, Luke spoke gently about hope, resilience, and the importance of embracing the present moment. Life isn't always easy, he said, but it's full of moments that remind us we're alive. It's up to us to notice them, to hold on to them, and to let them guide us forward. Emily listened, feeling each word resonate deep within her. She had spent so much of her life looking backward, haunted by what had been lost. But now she understood the power of looking forward, of embracing what could be. After the ride, they returned to the cabin, where Emily began to help with small chores, cooking, and organizing. Each task, though simple, gave her a sense of purpose and accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. She realized that healing was not about avoiding work or challenges, but about finding balance and joy in the everyday moments. Luke's guidance and patience allowed her to explore this new sense of freedom without fear, and she cherished every moment of it. As evening approached, Emily stood on a small hill overlooking the fields. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the sun dipped slowly toward the horizon. She felt a sense of awe and gratitude, a recognition that life, despite its hardships, could be breathtakingly beautiful. She turned to Luke, who had joined her, and smiled. "I've never felt so alive," she said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of wonder, relief, and joy. Luke smiled in return, understanding the depth of her words without needing further explanation. They stood together in silence, watching the sun disappear behind the hills, and Emily felt a profound sense of connection to him, to the world, and to herself. She realized that life had given her a second chance, a chance not just to survive, but to truly live. The pain she had endured had not disappeared, but it had shaped her, strengthened her, and prepared her to embrace the happiness that was finally within reach. In the days that followed, Emily continued to explore the possibilities of her new life. She learned more about the land, the animals, and the rhythms of nature. She laughed, played, and shared stories with Luke, discovering the joy of companionship and trust. Each day brought small victories, moments of joy, and experiences that reminded her of her own strength and capacity for happiness. She realized that life was not about avoiding pain, but about finding light even in the darkest moments. Emily also began to reconnect with her father in a new way. She found the courage to share her experiences with him, telling him about the storm, Luke's kindness, and the sense of hope that had returned to her life. Her father listened with pride and relief, happy to see his daughter reclaiming her joy. Emily realized that her journey was not just about herself, but about the people she loved, and that embracing happiness allowed her to give back love and care in return. As weeks passed, Emily's confidence grew. She felt stronger, more capable, and more aware of her own worth. She discovered talents and interests she had long forgotten, from painting and writing to caring for the animals and tending the garden. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, filled her with a sense of pride and possibility. She realized that life was full of opportunities for growth, love, and joy, and that she was ready to embrace them fully. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Emily reflected on the path that had brought her here. She thought about the years of hardship, the loneliness, and the sense of despair that had once defined her life. But now, she understood that those experiences had not broken her. They had prepared her to recognize and embrace the beauty that life could offer. She had been given a chance to rewrite her story, and she intended to live it fully, without fear or hesitation. Luke reached out and took her hand gently, a gesture that spoke volumes. Emily felt a warmth spread through her, a reassurance that she was not alone. She realized that life was richer and more meaningful when shared with someone who cared deeply. Their bond had grown naturally, built on trust, kindness, and shared experiences, and it gave Emily the courage to fully embrace her newfound freedom and joy. In the weeks and months that followed, Emily flourished. She continued to explore the land, develop her skills, and nurture her relationships. The cabin became a place of learning, laughter, and growth, a sanctuary where she could thrive. Emily discovered that life was not about avoiding challenges or running from pain, but about embracing the present, finding meaning in small moments, and allowing oneself to feel alive. The transformation in Emily was profound. She had emerged from her struggles stronger, wiser, and more resilient. She no longer defined herself by the hardships she had endured, but by the courage, strength, and hope she carried within her. She had learned that life could be beautiful, even after pain, and that happiness was not something to wait for, it was something to create, nurture, and embrace every day. One night, as the stars shone brightly overhead, Emily stood on the hill with Luke by her side. The world felt vast, endless, and full of possibilities. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air on her face, and whispered quietly, "I've never felt so alive." The words were not just a reflection of a single moment, but a declaration of a new life, one filled with hope, joy, and the courage to face whatever came next. Emily knew that life would still bring challenges, storms, and moments of fear. But she also knew that she had the strength, resilience, and support to face them. She had discovered that the world could hold kindness, connection, and beauty, and that she was capable of embracing it fully. The past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She had been given a chance to live freely, to love, and to experience the fullness of life. As she and Luke walked back to the cabin hand in hand, Emily felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She looked forward to the days ahead, knowing they would be filled with laughter, learning, and shared moments of joy. The storm had passed, both in the sky and in her heart, and a new chapter of her life had begun, one filled with hope, freedom, and the knowledge that she could truly be alive. And in that moment, Emily realized something profound. Happiness was not a distant dream or a fleeting moment. It was something she could cultivate, something she could hold in her heart, and something she could share with others. She had been saved, not just from the storm, but from a life that had grown too heavy with pain. And in the warmth of the cabin, the glow of the fire, and the presence of someone who cared, Emily had finally found what she had been searching for all along: a life worth living, a heart worth opening, and the courage to feel alive in every moment.